Okay, so we are going to start talking about chapter 4. Chapter 4 talks about tissues. So, when we say tissue, what do we mean by that? What is tissue?
Group of cells.
A group of similar looking cells, when perform a specific function or kind of similar or specific function, we call it tissue, right? Okay, so the study of tissue is called what? Histology. Very good. So when we say tissue, do you know how many different types of the tissues we have in our body? How many? 4 different types of the tissue we have in our body. So if you want me to talk about the 4 different types of the tissue in our body, I'm going to start with the epithelial tissue. The reason I'm going to start with the epithelial tissue is because epithelial tissue is the part of all the membranes in your body, all the linings in your body, all the glands in your body. Okay? So now if your epithelial tissue is the part of lining, membrane, or the glands, what could be the function of the epithelial tissue?
The skin.
Huh?
The skin.
It's part of skin. Huh?
Protection.
Protection, very good. Secretion, gland secretion. And then what else? What else they can do? Most important is the what? Boundaries, right? Boundaries between the different environments, protects, secrete, absorb, and filters. Okay? Okay. So now next one. Right underneath the epithelial tissue, we have connective tissue. What do we have? Connective tissue. Do you know connective tissue is basically the most abundant tissue in our body? When we say most abundant tissue in our body, what do we mean by that?
It's everywhere.
Hmm?
You can't find it everywhere.
You can find everywhere. It's the most, right? Widely available everywhere. So when we say widely available everywhere, what are the examples of the connective tissue? Your blood, your bone, your cartilage, and also all the soft padding tissue underneath your what? Skin. Okay? And also the adipose tissue, which stores the what? Fat. Right? All these are examples of the connective tissue, and then your connective tissue is the what? Most abundant tissue. So what could be the function of the connective tissue? Support, protect, and binds with other tissues together. Okay? Okay, so the next one, muscle tissue. When we say muscle tissue, what do we mean by that?
So muscle.
Muscle, we have 3 different types of the muscle, right? Everyone is kind of familiar with the skeletal muscle, the muscle we have on top of our skeleton, right? We are aware of that. But are you also aware of the muscle we have in our heart? Our heart is made up of cardiac muscle, and all of your hollow organs in your body is made up of the smooth muscle. So how many different types of the muscle we have? 3. Number 1 is your skeletal muscle, which helps with the voluntary movement, and then you have your cardiac muscle and the smooth muscle help with the involuntary movement. Okay, so what is the function of the muscle tissue anyways? Contraction and relaxation to help you move. Okay, now let's talk about the most important tissue in your body. The reason I say it the most important tissue is because rest of the tissue in your body would not work if you did not have that tissue. That is called the nervous tissue. The reason you can walk, The reason you can do everything, the reason you are sitting here is because of the what? Your nervous tissue. So when we say nervous tissue, where do we find them? In your brain, in the spinal cord, and in the nerve. And what is the function of the nervous tissue?
Sends the signal to the body.
Responding to the environment, right? Response. Okay. So now let's start with the epithelial tissue. So one more time, where do we find the epithelial tissue? We find the epithelial tissue in all the linings, all the membranes and the glands. Okay? Covering and lining of the epithelia and the glandular epithelia. Glandular epithelia is also called myoepithelia. So these glandular epithelia, like for example, give me some example, your salivary glands, your sweat glands, right? All these glands also have the what? A layer of the cells, okay? So one more important thing I want to tell you about the epithelial tissue is epithelial tissue where cells are gonna make the what? Layer. Either cell is going to make one layer or cell is going to make what? Multiple layers. So to make the layer, the cell has to be what? The cell has to stay very, very close to each other. Is it clear to everyone? So when we say epithelial tissue, what do we mean by that? The cells are always making one layer or multiple layers. Okay? So now, one thing I want you to understand about the epithelial tissue is basically, since epithelial tissue is actually the part of the lining or the membrane, membrane or lining is always facing the what? Environment. So whenever you are looking the epithelial tissue, that's probably the outer layer or probably the innermost layer. When we say innermost layer, is it making sense? Like for example, if you're thinking about the hollow tract or any tube. So when we say inner membrane, what do we mean by that? It means it's facing that cavity inside, or it's facing the what inside? That tube inside, right? The environment outside or that organ, hollow organ inside. So they have that's why cell has the what? Polarity, top and the bottom. So when we say the top, that is your upper surface or the apical surface, which is the upper free side. So always this is the environment, this is your what? Upper free side or apical surface is exposed to the surface or cavity. So most apical surfaces are smooth, but some have specialized finger-like projections called microvilli or cilia. We just talked about that. Can you remind me, where do you find the microvilli? In your small intestine outside, so that you can efficiently absorb the nutrient. And where do you find the cilia, which is the hair-like structure? In your respiratory tract, right? So right outside the apical surface of your epithelium. So a layer of cell, this is your apical surface. So on top of the apical surface, sometimes you can have the cilia or microvilli. Sometimes you may not have anything. It could be just smooth, right? So when we say the basal surface, what do we mean by the basal surface? So if this is the upper surface, this is the what? Basal surface. In the basal surface, what did I tell you? So you have your skin or the first layer, the epithelium, then underneath the padding tissue is the what? Connective tissue. So your basal surface, which is the lower attached side, faces toward the body, attaches to the basal lamina, an adhesive sheet that holds basal surface of the epithelium cells to the underlying cells. And both surfaces differ in structure and function. Both of your apical surface and the basal surface is actually different in terms of their what? Structure and the function. So now let's talk about the epithelial tissue always have the what? specialized contacts and epithelial tissue tightly packed cells. I already told you the cells are very, very close to each other. And always your epithelial tissue is what? Padded by the connective tissue. Right underneath your epithelial tissue, you have the what? Connective tissue. If the first layer is the epithelial tissue, the next is the what? Connective tissue. So all epithelial sheets are supported by the connective tissue. Basement membrane sheet of the connective tissue. So the basal lamina and the reticular lamina. So when we talk about the connective tissue, you will see that we have so many different type of the fibers which are present in the connective tissue, like collagen fiber, like reticular fiber, right? All these fibers are part of the connective tissue. And the basal lamina is what? Deep to the epithelium, which contain the collagen fiber, and reticular lamina contain the reticular fiber. And one most important thing I want you to understand right here, that your epithelial tissue is what? Avascular. So when we say avascular, what does it mean? It means that they do not have the blood supply. They do not have the blood supply. The very top layer on your skin is actually what? Dead. Okay, so avascular, say they do not have the blood supply. However, they have nerve supply. That is why if anything happens, you can actually feel it. So nourished by the underlying connective tissue. So most important part of the epithelial tissue is they're very, very highly regenerative. When we say highly regenerative, what do we mean by that? So for any reason, if you are cutting or if you have burn or if anything happens, you will see your epithelial tissue always regenerate, right? So imagine if it's not happening, what would have happened?
Just die, the infection die.
Because your epithelial tissue is the first line of defense. Your epithelial tissue is the what? Boundary. Yeah, right, to protect yourself. So if it is not doing that, it's probably not a good news for you. So that is why epithelial tissue is supposed to be very, very regenerative. Okay, so now let's talk about the way you all have two names, first name and the last name. Epithelial tissue also have the what? First name and the last name. So their first name come from how many layers they have. If they have one layer, their first name is what? Simple. If they have one layer, what is their first name? Simple. And if they have multiple layer, what is their first name? Stratified. Stratified meaning is what? Layers. Stratified is coming from stratum. Stratum means what? Layer. So if they have one layer, what is the first name of epithelial tissue?
Simple.
Simple. If they have multiple layers, what is the first name of the epithelial tissue? Stratified. Very good. What about their last name? Their last name is coming from the shape of the cell. Their last name is coming from where? The shape of the cell. So there could be many different shape of the cell. One type of shape could be flat cell. If they have flat cell, we call it squamous. If they have flat cell, what do we call it? Squamous. If they have one layer of flat cell, what do we call it? Simple squamous. If they have multiple layer of flat cell, what do we call it? Stratified squamous. Sometimes they can have cube shaped cell. When we say cube, what do we mean by that? They have the same length and the width. Okay? If they have one layer of cube shaped cell, we call it simple cuboidal. If they have multiple layer of cube shaped cell, what do we call it? Stratified cuboidal. And then sometimes they can have the what? Column shaped cell. Column shaped cell. When we say column shape, what does it mean? They are taller than their width. If they have column shaped cell, what do we call it? One layer of column shaped cell, simple columnar. If they have multiple layer of column shaped cell, what do we call it? Stratified columnar. So in terms of the columnar, you need to understand there is another type which is called the pseudo-stratified. Do you know pseudo means what? False. So pseudo-stratified means they have the false layers. So what does that mean? It means that they have one layer of column-shaped cells. However, they appear that they have multiple layer of column-shaped cells. Even though they have only one layer of cell, they look like they have multiple layer of column-shaped cells. That is why they are called the what? Pseudo-stratified columnar. And there is another exceptional type of the cell, which is type of the epithelial tissue, which is called the transitional epithelial tissue. So this transitional epithelial tissue does not have a specific shape. They can have multiple different type of the shape together. That is why they are called the transitional epithelial tissue. Okay. So when we say the stratified squamous, mostly the stratified squamous you will find in the what? In the skin. If you are talking about the skin or hair, what does that mean? On top of the skin or hair, we have a keratin layer, right? Keratin layer, that protective layer, keratin layer. So that sometimes stratified squamous can have keratin on top, we call it keratinized. Sometimes they don't have it, then we call it non-keratinized. Okay, so these are the different types of the epithelial tissue. As I told you already, if you look at the one layer of flat cell, what do you call it? Simple squamous. So usually you find the one layer of flat cell or simple squamous in the kidney glomeruli, air sacs of the lungs, lining of the heart, blood vessel or lymphatic vessels, and serosa. The reason you find it there, that one layer of cells, so that they can do the what? Transportation very easily. If you think about the alveoli of the lung, what does that mean? What is the function? They have to exchange the gases. So that they can exchange the gases very easily. That is the reason they only have the what? One layer of the what? One layer of the tissue. So allows material to pass by the diffusion and filtration in sites where protection is not important, secretes lubricating substance in serosa. So now let's talk about the cuboidal. Let's talk about the cuboidal. So when we think about the or look at the cuboidal, so how do we understand what is the cuboidal? First of all, they should have the cube-shaped cell. So as you can see the whole round structure right here, they have a layer of cube-shaped cell. With the cuboidal, most of the time you will see that the cuboidal is making a circle like this. Okay, if you see a circle like this, that means we are talking about the what? Cuboidal. Okay, simple cuboidal. And inside this is the what? Inside that, so for example, this cuboidal cell is present in the kidney tubule, duct, secretory portion of the small glands, and ovary surface. So what does that mean? So they always have this duct inside, right? Ducts or tubes, right? So that is what you are seeing right here. So ducts or tubes. So this is the simple cuboidal is making the ducts or tubes. So most of the time the function of the simple cuboidal is the what? Secretion and absorption. So now the next one, simple columnar. Next one is the what? Simple columnar. So you see the one layer of the column shaped cell, one layer of the column shaped cell. So when you look at the one layer of the column shaped cell, on top of the column shaped cells, also do you see something on top right here? Microvilli, right? Do you remember we talked about the microvilli? What is the function of the microvilli one more time? That's cilia. I'm talking about the microvilli. Small intestine to absorb the nutrient efficiently. Okay, so you see the microvilli. Usually a lot of the time you are going to find the simple columnar in the what? In this time. In addition to that, you will also find non-ciliated type lines. Most of the digestive tract, stomach, rectum, gallbladder, excretory duct of the some gland, ciliated variety lines of the small bronchi, uterine tubes, and some regions of the uterus. Okay? Okay. So now one thing I want you to notice here, when you are looking at one layer of the columnar cell, you will see most of the nucleus of the cells kind of like aligning in one line. Okay. However, when you look at the pseudostratified, even though they have the what? One line of the cell or one layer of the cell, but the nucleus do not align. That is why it gives you the appearance of false layer. That is why this is called the pseudostratified columnar. So a lot of the time you are going to find this pseudostratified columnar where in the ciliated variety lines of the trachea, most of the upper respiratory tract, non-ciliated types in males, sperm carrying ducts, and ducts of the large glands. Okay, so as you can see, they have the cilia on top. Okay, so what about the stratified squamous? Stratified squamous. So as you can see right here, stratified squamous. So multiple layer, 1, 2, 3, 4, the flat cell, right? Where do you find them? So sometimes the keratinized on the skin, but what about the non-keratinized? Non-keratinized type forms the moist lining of the esophagus, mouth and vagina, and keratinized variety forms the epidermis of the skin, a dry epithelium. Okay, so on your skin you have a layer of the what? A layer of the keratin on top of the stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, but if you think about the moist layer inside, like the lining of the esophagus, mouth and vagina, you're gonna find the stratified squamous without the layer of keratin. Okay, so what is the function? Protects the underlying tissues in areas subjected to abrasion. Okay, so now let's talk about the stratified cuboidal. Just to let you know, the way you saw the simple cuboidal in a circle, stratified cuboidal also you will see in circle. Okay, because the location is the ducts of the most exocrine gland, some regions of the male urethra and ovarian follicles. And what is the function? Protection and the secretion. And what about the stratified columnar? Stratified columnar, where do you find them? Large ducts of the salivary glands and in membranous part of the male urethra. And what is the function? Protection and secretion. Okay, so now let's talk about the transitional. Remind me, when we say transitional, what do we mean by that? They do not have the specific shape. They have multiple different type of the shapes together. Okay, that is why this is called the transitional epithelium. Usually you find them in the lines of the uterus, bladder and part of the urethra. What is the function? Stretches readily, permits stored urine to distant urinary organ. Okay, so
Real quick, I just have a question about the epithelial cells. So you said that they're highly regenerative. So then how do they get the nutrients and proteins and all that when they're avascular?
that's a very good question. So when we talk about the integumentary system, it's going to be clear to you, but for now I'm just going to let you know something. Right underneath your epithelial tissue, which is protected by the what? Connective tissue. Connective tissue is very, very highly what? Vascular. Okay, it provides all the nutrients to everything. So when you look at the epithelial tissue lining, they have multiple layers. The layer which is very close to the connective tissue, that is the only layer which is probably containing the what? Stem cell. So they are the one which is getting all the blood supply from the connective tissue to be able to do what? Regenerate. And then when they move upward, the very top layer, that's when they become what? Dead. because that's when they do not get any what nutrients. However, what is happening? It's the layer which is close to the connective tissue, that is the only layer which is mitotic. Does it make sense? So that is how they're getting the blood supply, nutrients and everything to regenerate. Very good question. Yeah, good job. Okay, so now let's talk about the glands. So do you know what is gland? When we say gland, what do we mean by that? We know that we have exocrine gland, we have endocrine gland. When we say exocrine gland, they secrete something outside like saliva, like mucus, right? Like sweat, like oil, right? What about the endocrine gland? The glands which secretes thing inside like your hormones, right? So these are the endocrine gland. So now we have two different types of the gland, endocrine gland and the exocrine gland, and these glands are actually lined by the what? Layer of the epithelial tissue. Okay? So now we can have unicellular exocrine gland, we can also have multicellular exocrine gland. So when we say unicellular exocrine gland, what do we mean by that? It means we only have two examples. That's all. We have mucus cells and the goblet cell. What do they do? You will always find them in the epithelial lining of the intestinal and the respiratory tract, because you want them to be what? Moist. The reason they are moist because they secrete what? Mucin, a sugar protein that can dissolve in water to form the mucus, a slippery what? Tract, so that through that you can actually move things, right? Okay. So now let's talk about the multicellular exocrine gland. So when we say multicellular exocrine gland, as you can see, they are forming the layers, right? These layers of the cells together is also forming a tube-like structure. If they are forming one tube, we call it simple tubular. This is the what? Branched simple tubular, and this is the what? Compound. Not only branched, but also more branches from the branch. So that is why this is called the compound. What about the this is the tubular, because they are making a tube shape, and alveolar is making the what? Alveoli shape, the sac-like structure. Do you see a sac-like structure? So this is simple because they are making one sac. So here they are making the branches. So this is called the simple branched alveoli, alveolar. So what about this one? Compound alveolar, compound tubuloalveolar. So when we say compound alveolar, we see all the branches have the what? Alveoli shape. And when we say compound tubuloalveolar, they are forming a tube first, and then at the end they are forming a sac. That is why this is called the compound tubuloalveolar. So what does that mean? Also, I want you to understand what is the function of this tube and what is the function. So they have this secretory space right here, right? Where they do the secretion. And here they store. Here they store and here they secrete. So they have a secretory part and the storage part. Okay? Okay. So now let's talk about multicellular exocrine gland can secrete or excrete in three different ways. One of them is called the merocrine. One of them is called the what? Merocrine. When we say merocrine, what do? They do the exocytosis. Okay, who can tell me what is exocytosis? We just talked about it in the chapter 3. What is exocytosis? Huh? Something exiting out of the cell by the use of energy and vesicles, right? So that is the exocytosis. So when we say merocrine, we are talking about the normal exocytosis. That is how you have your secretion of the sweat, secretion of the oil like the sebum, right? That is happening by the secretion of the sweat and secretion of the pancreatic, do you know what is secreted from the pancreas? Your insulin, glucagon, right? So these are happening by the merocrine. So what about the holocrine? Holocrine is they are actually storing until they rupture. They are storing until they get ruptured. That is how they are actually secreting. So that is why this is called the holocrine. Accumulate products within and then rupture. So for example, your sebaceous oil glands. And there is another type of gland which is called the apocrine gland. Accumulate products within, but only apex rupture, not the whole thing rupture. Only the end is getting ruptured, and cell pinches off. Whether this type exists in human is controversial. Maybe the mammary cells or ceruminous glands. Do you know what is the ceruminous gland? In your ear, producing the earwax. And the mammary gland or mammary cells is producing the breast milk. Yeah. Okay. So you probably have some question asked about that in your lecture exam. So make sure you understand that. Okay. Okay, so what did you learn so far? Why does then epithelium need to be highly regenerative? Because they are the boundary, right? So for the protection, they have to make sure they regenerate very, very, very easily. How does simple epithelium differ from the stratified epithelium? One layer, multiple layer. Very good. What epithelial tissue lines the air sacs of the lungs? Simple squamous. Why? Simple squamous is one layer, helps easily transport what? Gases or exchange gases. Okay? Okay, so what do you think about the epithelial tissue so far? Good? You know what? In the lab, you should be able to do few things. Number one, you need to be able to identify by looking at the structure what type of tissue it is, where is the location, and what is their function. So if you look at the content, under the content, lab material content, I made a chart for you where you have all the different type of the tissue, where is the location and what is their function. Okay, so that it gets easier. But when you go to the lab today, I'm gonna show you the picture of different types of the picture to be able to make sure that you understand how each specific tissue looks like. Okay. Okay. So now let's talk about the most abundant tissue. What is the name of the most abundant tissue? Connective tissue. So connective tissue is the most abundant and widely distributed of the primary tissue. What is the major function? Binding and support, protecting, insulating, storing reserve fuel, and transporting substances. So can you tell me who transports substances? Like blood, right? Okay. So four main classes. One is the connective tissue proper. The most abundant one is the what? Connective tissue proper. That is the one which is the providing the soft padding tissue right underneath your epithelial tissue. And then you have the cartilage. When we say cartilage, what do we mean by that? Your ear, your nose, in your rib cage you have the intercostal cartilage. And then everyone knows what is bone, right? Does anybody here who doesn't know what is bone? No? Good. So what about the blood? Everyone knows what is blood. So these are all the examples of the connective tissue. So one thing I want you to understand, when we talk about the connective tissue, we need to understand that they have three things. So epithelial tissue, we know that epithelial tissue is only cell. They only have what? Cell. Because the cells are very close to each other, they are making the what? Layer. But whenever we are talking about the connective tissue is not like that. Connective tissue is not like a lot of cells making layers. It's not like that. So if you actually look at the connective tissue, you will see that the connective tissue, the cells are submerged in so many fibers and the ground substances. So cells are not very close to each other. Cells are instead floating in the fibers and the ground substances. So cells are what? Floating in the ground substances. Okay? Fibers and the ground substances. So now there are different types of the substances, ground substances, and there are different types of the what? Fibers. Okay? So actually there are three types of fibers. Number one is your collagen fiber, and then you have your collagen fiber, reticular fiber, and the elastic fiber. These are the three types of fiber. What are the fibers again? Collagen, reticular, and the elastic. Collagen, reticular, and the elastic fiber. Okay, so these are the three types of the fiber. So when you look at the connective tissue proper, they can have different type of the cells. So they can have cells like fibroblast, fibrocyte, defensive cells, adipocyte. One thing I want you to notice here, when we say blast and when we say cyte, what is the difference between the blast and the cyte? We are talking about the cell itself, right? But when we say blast, what do we mean by that? We are talking about the developing cell, okay? When we say cyte, that means the cell is already mature, okay? So you have the fibroblast, which is developing, fibrocyte, which is mature cell, and the defensive cell, defense cell. Can you tell me some example of the defense cells? Your white blood cells, okay? And then you can have the adipocyte. When we say adipocyte, what do we mean by that? They store fat, okay? So what are the ground substances or the matrix? What do they, what are those? Gel-like ground substance, all three fibers like collagen fiber, reticular fiber, elastic fiber. And what are the general features of the connective tissue proper? They have 6 different types, vary in density and types of the fiber, function as a binding tissue, resist mechanical stress, particularly tension, and provide reservoir for water and salt. And your adipocyte or adipose tissue helps with the what? Fat storage. Now let's talk about the cartilage. So when we say cartilage, cartilage have a very specific type of the cell. What is the name of the cell? The name of the cartilage cell is the what? Chondroblast, which is growing or developing, or chondrocyte, okay? So you know what? This chondroblast and the chondrocyte, these cells are very like, they are like, we want our own personal room. Each cell has their own personal room. Do you know the name of the room? The name of the room is lacuna. What is the name of the room? Lacuna. So if you look at the cartilage right here, you see the cell is inside the specific room. That room is the what? That room is the lacuna, okay? So now let's talk about what are the different types of the fiber you can find in the cartilage. You find collagen fiber, elastic fiber, and the gel-like ground substance. And then what about the bone? Bone can be also 2 types, compact bone, spongy bone. And then your bone, what are the name of the cells? Osteoblast, osteocyte. Similar to the chondroblast and chondrocyte, they also want to stay in their own room, and we call it lacuna, okay? And what are the fibers you usually find? The bones have the collagen fiber, okay? And all of them have the ground-like substances. And what about the blood? Blood can have 3 different type of the cells. You can have the platelets, you can have the red blood cell, white blood cell, and the matrix is your plasma, and they do not have any fiber. Only this one does not have any fiber. Okay, so all 3 characteristics make connective tissue different from the other primary tissue. So all have common embryonic origin and all arise from the mesenchyme tissue as their tissue of origin. So your connective tissue is arising from which tissue? Mesenchyme tissue. Have varying degree of vascularity. They do have vascularity, the blood supply, and cells are suspended or embedded in the extracellular matrix. So I told you already, the cells are actually floating instead of making layers like the epithelial tissue. So now, as I have been talking about how your connective tissue actually looks like. So as you can see, these are the cells. So these cells are submerged in the ground substances and the different types of the fiber. The thickest fiber is called the what? Collagen fiber. The thickest fiber is the collagen fiber. And then the reticular fiber is the thinnest one. Reticular fiber is also coming from the name reticulum. Reticulum is what? What is the meaning of reticulum? Net-like structure. Okay. And then what about the elastic fiber, which is the what? In between the collagen and the reticular, right? Reticular is the thinnest and collagen is the thickest, and elastic fiber is in between. And a lot of the time when you look at the cells or tissues under the microscope, you will see that your elastic fiber looks very, very dark purple. If you see very dark purple fiber, that means you are looking at the what? Elastic fiber. Okay, so I did talk about the difference between the blast and the cell, right? Site. So when we say blast, we are talking about the developing immature cell. Whenever we are talking about the site or cell, we are talking about the mature cell. So now let's start talking about the connective tissue proper first. So when we say connective tissue propers are actually two different types. Loose connective tissue proper, dense connective tissue proper. So when we say loose connective tissue proper, what do we mean by that? Loose connective tissue proper has what? Loose arrangements of the fiber. Loose fiber. Loose connective tissue has the what? Loose fiber. Dense connective tissue has the what? Dense fiber. Okay? Loose connective tissue has the loose fiber. Dense connective tissue has the dense fiber. So the loose connective tissue proper are three different types: areolar, adipose, and reticular. Areolar, adipose, and reticular. And your dense connective tissue proper are how many different types? Three different types: regular, irregular, and elastic. So now let's start talking about the connective tissue proper. Loose connective tissue proper and the what? Dense connective tissue proper. So the first one is your areolar loose connective tissue proper. So as you can see right here, these are the cells. The cells are actually what? Submerged or suspended inside the what? Ground substances, and these are all the what? Fiber. The reason this is called the areolar loose connective tissue proper, first of all, the fibers are very, very loose, and then as you can see, the what? You have your cells which are submerged, and the submerged, and then they are very what? They have a lot of space and kind of like air-like, right? So areolar loose connective tissue proper. So what type of cells they usually have? They can have the fibroblast. What type of fiber do they have? They have the thick collagen fiber. All these dark purple, these are all the what? Elastic fiber. Every time you see the dark purple and a little bit thin, that is the what? Elastic fiber. So where do you usually find them? Widely distributed under the epithelia of the body, forms lamina propria of the mucous membrane and packages organs and surround capillaries. So what is the function? Wraps and cushions organs, and its macrophages phagocytize bacteria, plays important role in inflammation, holds, and convey tissue fluid. Now let's talk about another loose connective tissue proper. This example is the what? Adipose tissue. So what is the function of the adipose tissue? Store fat. So have you ever seen fat, lipid, oil? So imagine a ball of the fat or oil. How would they look like? Like this. Okay, fat droplet. Okay, so this is very easy to understand. So a lot of the time you find that under the what?
Connective tissue.
Under the skin in the subcutaneous tissue, around the kidney, eyeballs, and within the abdomen and in the breast. Okay, so now let's talk about the reticular connective tissue proper. So I told you already, when we say reticular, what do we mean by that? They have a lot of what? Very thin reticulum, right? Thin net-like fiber. So if you see thin net-like fiber, not this one is a like really good one, but I'll show you some more in the lab today. Then you will understand what I'm trying to actually tell you. So these are the what? Reticular loose connective tissue proper. Usually you find them in your lymphoid organ like lymph node, bone marrow, and the spleen. So now let's move to the what? Dense connective tissue proper. So when we say dense, do you see the difference with the loose and the dense? So when you see the dense, what do you see? Do you see that they are what? The fibers are very, very dense, close to each other, number one. Number two, the name is not only the what? Dense connective tissue proper, but also they are what? Regular dense connective tissue proper. So when we say regular dense connective tissue proper, what do we mean by that? They have a regular arrangement of the what? Regular arrangement of the what? Fiber. Regular dense arrangement of the fiber, and you have the cells inside. Okay, usually you find them in the tendon, most ligaments. Yeah. So now let's talk about the irregular dense connective tissue proper. So what do you see?
It's irregular.
The fibers are very, very irregular. However, they are very close to each other. So where do you usually find them? Fibrous capsule of the organ and of joints, dermis of the skin, submucosa of the digestive tract. Now let's talk about the elastic connective tissue proper. Does it look like elastic? Have you ever seen elastic? Right? And another thing, what did I tell you about the elastic fiber? If they have a lot of elastic fiber, regular dense, right? This is dense connective tissue proper. So what does that mean? What type of, what is the color? Very, very dark purple, right? Very, very dark purple. Okay, where do you usually find them? Walls of the large arteries, within certain ligaments associated with the vertebral column, within the walls of the bronchial tubes. Now let's move to the cartilage. So when we say cartilage, what do we mean by that? All the cartilage we have, right? In your pinna, and then nose, intercostal, right? These are all the, and also if you have a long bone, on top of the long bone you have a layer of what? Cartilage too. Okay, so their avascular receive nutrient from membranes surrounding it. Perichondrium. Perichondrium give rise to chondroblast and the chondrocyte. So now there are three different type of the cartilage. How many different type of the cartilage? Three different type. Number one is called the hyaline cartilage. The way to know which one is hyaline cartilage, you need to imagine the footstep of the what? Horse on the ice ground. So think about this as an ice ground, and these are the what? Step of the horse. Does it look like that? Yeah? Kind of. Huh?
It's the same like a footstep of the horse on the ground.
On the ice ground, I would
Ice
say.
ground.
Yeah. It looks like that. Yeah. So if it looks like that, that is what you are talking about, the hyaline cartilage. So these are the what? Chondrocyte. This black is the what? Chondrocyte. These are the cells, and these cells are housed in the lacuna. They have their personal room. They are housed in the lacuna. And where do you usually find them? Intercostal, right? In your rib cage, where your ribs are getting started from the sternum, that is the place you have the what? Hyaline cartilage. So the next one, if they have elastic fiber, what is the color one more time? Dark purple. If you see dark purple, that is the elastic fiber. And you have your chondrocyte inside the lacuna, and these are the matrix. Okay, and this one is called the elastic cartilage. So elastic cartilage, where do you find it? Your external ear and the epiglottis. And then the next one, the fibrocartilage. Let me tell you a cheating code. What is the cheating code? Every time you see something very, very dark blue, we are talking about fibrocartilage. Because this specific collagen fiber right here can only be stained as dark blue. If you see something very, very dark blue, we are talking about the what? Fibrocartilage. Okay, where do you usually find them? Intervertebral disc and pubic symphysis on the disc of the knee joint. Yeah, that's where you find it. Now let's talk about the bone. Let's talk about the bone. So when you look at the bone, it's so easy to understand because they are very, very different than other different types of the tissue, right? However, let me ask you a question. Do you think the whole circle right here is a cell? Huh? Is a cell? No. So what is the name of the bone cell? Osteocyte. What is the name of the bone cell? Osteocyte. This osteocyte is basically this dark black right here, you see? These are the what? Osteocyte. The whole big circle of this is called the osteon. What do we call it? Osteon. We are going to learn a lot about that when we talk about the skeletal tissue. Okay? But for now, just know that this is the osteon and this right here is the what? Osteocyte. Okay? Where do you find them? All the bones in your body, right? And we have two different types of the bones actually. We have the spongy bone and we also have the compact bone. This is the structure of the compact bone. Eventually in future you are going to learn about the spongy bone as well. Okay. What about the next one? Connective tissue. Connective tissue. Blood. So kind of everyone knows about it. Blood has fiber. Blood is the only connective tissue that does not have any fiber. But they have three different type of the cell. What are the three different type of the cell?
Red, white.
Red blood cell, white blood cell,
Plasma.
huh?
Plasma.
And plasma. Plasma is not the cell. Plasma is the liquid part of the blood. Red blood cell, white blood cell, and the platelets. So these are the four different types of the what?
Cells.
Cell. Okay, so what are the three basic components of the connective tissue? Three basic components of the connective tissue. What do they have? Number one is the fibers. Number two is the ground substances. And number three is the cell. Right? They have different types of the cell. They have three different types of the fibers. They have ground substances. Okay, so compare loose connective tissue to dense connective tissue. What is the difference between the loose and the dense?
Dance are together.
Huh?
Close together.
Dense fibers are close together and loose fibers are, yeah. So describe the composition and location of the fibrocartilage.
It's blue.
Blue. And fibrocartilage, where is it located? Knee joint and then pubic symphysis.
What is that?
So let me show you one more time. So in the intervertebral disc, and when we say pubic symphysis is the very, like you have your hip bone. When we talk about the different structure of the hip bone, you will understand what is the pubic symphysis.
But it's not your tailbone.
Huh?
It's not your tailbone.
Right there. Okay. What do you think about the epithelial tissue and the connective tissue? Before I move forward and talk about the muscle tissue, let me see if anybody can tell me here. what are the different types of the epithelial tissue first? Who remembers all the different types of the epithelial tissue? Let's see. 5 bonus point. If anybody can tell me. You?
Squamous, cuboidal, columnar.
Squamous, cuboidal, columnar. That's based on the shape.
Oh,
And then what is their first name?
simple and stratified.
Simple and stratified. Okay, very good. Now tell me what is that exceptional one? There are 2 exceptional one. Pseudo stratified,
and
columnar, and then transitional. Okay, very good. So write your name here. Okay. So bonus points. Okay. Now who can tell me about all the classification of the connective tissue? 5 bonus point. Anybody? I'm sure you can. It's not hard.
What was the question again?
Classification of the connective tissue. All the classes, all the types of the connective tissue. Maybe you can. 5 bonus point.
Is that like the collagen, the reticulum?
No. These are the fibers. I'm talking about the classification of the connective tissue itself.
Are you referring to the cartilage?
Hmm?
The cartilage?
So cartilage is one type. You can?
Like blood, bone. and
Blood,
the
bone, cartilage,
The cartilage proper.
connective tissue proper, but you also have to tell the sub-classification too. How many different types of the connective tissue proper?
There's.
Loose and dense.
Mhm.
And then loose has 3 different types. What are those? Areolar,
Areolar,
adipose, reticular, very good. And what about the dense?
It's gonna be
Reg-
regular, irregular, and
Elastic.
elastic.
Very good. And then what about the cartilage? How many different types of the cartilage we have?
It's just 3.
3. What are those?
Is that the myline?
Hyaline, hyaline cartilage,
And fibrocartilage.
fibrocartilage, and there is another one.
The bone?
Huh? Who has the dark purple color?
Fibro.
Fibrocartilage is blue color. Dark purple color? Elastic cartilage. So you can have elastic cartilage, right? Okay. So these are the different types of the connective tissue, and these are the different types of the what? Connective tissue and the what? Epithelial tissue. We are done. These are the complicated one. Now we are moving forward and talk about the what? Easy one. Okay. Muscle tissue, we only have how many different types of the muscle tissue? We only have 3 different types of the muscle tissue. How many different types of the muscle tissue we have? 3 different types of the muscle tissue we have. So we have 3 different types of the muscle tissue, and what are their names? Skeletal muscle, and then skeletal muscle, which is on top of your skeleton, and then you have your cardiac muscle, which is the part of your heart, and then you have the what? Smooth muscle, which is the part of your what? Which is the part of your what? All the hollow organs inside your body, right? Okay. So now let's talk about the skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle helps you move, and it requires lots of energy. That is the reason they have lots of mitochondria, and also they have lots of nuclei. And as you can see, the structure of they have the what? Striation, because of the structure, because of the presence of the fiber, part of the muscle fiber. So part of the muscle fiber, one muscle fiber is actually what? One muscle cell. We are talking about one fiber is actually one muscle cell, and it has the what? Multiple nuclei. So for example, if you think about this muscle cell, it has striation, and it has multiple nucleus. So where is it present? Everyone knows that, right on top of your skeleton. And then what is the function? Voluntary movement. You move them according to your will. The more you move it, the more you will have it. If you don't move them, you're gonna eventually lose it. Okay, so how do you understand what is the skeletal muscle? The way to understand the skeletal muscle, you will see the what? Striation. How do you understand? They have the striation and the multiple nucleus. What about the cardiac muscle? You will see they also have the striation. However, their muscle fiber is actually what? Branched. How? Their muscle fiber is what? Branched. And then the muscle fibers are actually attached to each other by an intercalated disc. You are going to see the intercalated disc. If you see striation, if you see intercalated disc, if you see branch, that means we are looking at the what? Cardiac muscle. Okay. So what is the where do you find the cardiac muscle? The walls of the heart. The walls of the heart contain the cardiac muscle. So do you tell your heart to move? Are you saying move please now? No, you are not saying that. So that means it's involuntary. It's moving by itself, right? Okay. So now let's talk about the smooth muscle. So when you see the smooth muscles are actually spindle shaped cell. They have the tapered end and they have one cell, one nucleus in each cell. Okay. And they do not have any striation. Okay, they do not have any striation. So mostly in the walls of the hollow organ, if you see walls of the hollow organ, like you're in your digestive tract, in your respiratory tract, the walls of the hollow organ contain the what? Smooth muscle. And what is their function? Involuntary movement. Now let's talk about the most important one and most easy one. The reason I call it the most important one, because this is the one which is actually controlling the function of other tissues. However, this one is very, very simple. The nervous tissue. What is the function of the nervous tissue? Communication, communicating to the environment, right? Okay, so now if you look at the nervous tissue, the way to understand this is nervous tissue, they have a very specific type of cell, we call it neuron. They have a head and a tail. If you look at this head, that head is called the cell body, and they have this tail, long tail is called the axon. Okay, so if you see neuron, that means you are looking at the what? You are looking at the nervous tissue. You are looking at the what? Nervous tissue. So what is the function? Where do you find them? Brain, spinal cord and the nerve. And what is the function? Neuron transmit electrical signal from sensory receptor and to effectors, muscles and glands, and supporting cells support and protect neurons. Okay. So what did you learn so far? Which of the three types of the muscle tissue is voluntary? Skeletal only, right? Where is the smooth muscle tissue found? Hollow organ, the walls of all the hollow organs. So where is the location of the nervous tissue? Brain, spinal cord and nerves. Very good. Okay, so now let's see how much time we have. Let's see if we can finish this chapter or not. We have like 15 minutes and we're almost done. So let me just finish it quickly, okay? So we have we know that our epithelial tissue is present in the what? Linings and the membranes and all this. So how many different types of the membranes we have? We have 3 different types of the membrane. One is called the what? Cutaneous membrane, mucous membrane and the serous membrane. First of all, let me ask you, when we say cutaneous membrane, what do we mean by that? Your skin, right? When we say mucous membrane, what do we mean by that? All this moist membrane inside, like in your respiratory tract, right? In your gastrointestinal tract, you have that moist membrane inside. That is the what? Mucous membrane. And then when we say the serous membrane, what do we mean by that? It means, do you remember what is the serous membrane? You have your
The linings between the organs.
cavity, right? In the cavity, you have the serosa membrane, right? So those membranes are also membranes. So all these membranes have the first layer, which is the what? Epithelial tissue, made up of epithelial tissue, and then underneath it has the what? Connective tissue. So now if you think about, if you are trying to look at all the layers of your what? Intestine. So now if you look at, we are looking at the stomach, right? If you look at the stomach, one thing I want you to understand that in most of your body part has actually all four different types of the tissue staying together, right? Like for example, even if you are talking about the skin, we are still talking about underneath the skin you have the connective tissue, underneath the connective tissue you have the muscle, underneath the muscle you have the what's bone, right? We are talking about pretty much everything. Pretty much all the parts of your body has all different types of the tissue. So if you take part of the stomach, you will see the outermost layer is what? Outermost layer is always the what? Epithelial tissue, right? Right underneath that you have the what? Connective tissue. And then you have the what? Muscle tissue, right? In the connective tissue you have the what? Vasculature, blood supply, and the what? Nerve supply, right? Yeah. So now let's talk about the tissue repair. So every time you have a cut or burn in the tissue, like what do you think? How easily you can repair? The most easy to repair is the what? Epithelial tissue. Hardest to repair is the what? Your nervous tissue. So that is why every time you have the what? Brain damage, it is so hard to repair. A lot of the time it does not even repair, and then people get paralyzed forever, right? Okay. So when the body's barriers are compromised, the inflammatory and the immune response are activated, and repair starts very quickly. So repair is the function of the inflammatory process. So repair can occur in two major ways. One is the regeneration, another one is the fibrosis. So when we say regeneration, what do we mean by that? You are replacing the cell with the same cell. But when we say fibrosis, you are replacing that cell with the connective tissue. That is called the fibrosis. So now how the tissue repair occur? The first thing, every time, first you get a cut, what happens? You start bleeding. When you start bleeding, the first thing what your body is gonna do is the what? Stop the bleeding. To stop the bleeding, what do you have to do? You have to have all the immune cells, all the platelets are gonna come and actually what? Blood clot formation, and then form a scab on top, right? Form a scab on top. Like, okay, let's just read it what they're saying. So trauma causes the injured tissue cells, muscle, and others to release inflammatory chemicals, and inflammatory chemicals make the local blood vessels leaky, allowing white blood cell, fluid clotting proteins, and other plasma proteins to seep into the injured area. And clotting seals off the injured area and prevents the bacteria, toxin, and other harmful substance from spreading. And the surface of the clot exposed to air dries and form the scab, right? After you do that, after you form the scab, what do you want to do? You want to make sure the clot is replaced by the ingrowth of the fragile capillaries that are characteristics of the granulation tissue. And this restores the vascular supply. So when you have the vascular supply, what does that mean? The fibroblasts multiply and produce growth factors and collagen fibers that bridge the gap. When healing is complete, these fibroblasts revert the resting stage or undergo apoptosis. Okay? And the macrophages phagocytize the dead and the dying cells and other debris, and surface epithelial cell multiply and begin to migrate over the granulation tissue. So that is when actually you are regenerating. So the fibrous area matures and contracts and pulling the margins of the wound together, As it regenerates, the epithelium thickens under the scab, which detaches. The fully regenerated epithelium with an underlying area of the scar tissue result. And the scar may be visible as a white line depending on the severity of the wound. Okay, have you ever seen, if you take off that scab from the top, there is a white line, but sometimes that gets like very close to the color of your skin eventually, right? Okay, so now the question becomes, who can easily regenerate? Definitely your epithelial tissue, your bone, your areolar connective tissue, dense irregular connective tissue, and the blood forming tissue. Do you know what is the blood forming tissue? Bone marrow, right? And then tissue with the moderate regeneration capacity, your smooth muscle, and the dense regular connective tissue. What about the tissue with virtually no functional regenerative capacity? Your cardiac muscle. So if you are damaging your heart, it's not possible to regenerate. If you are damaging your brain, it's not possible to regenerate. Okay, so now let me tell you something very important. We know that, have you ever heard of the embryonic layer? So before you have the differentiation, right? We were the what? A bulb of the cells, multiple cells, right? So in that cell, we had three layers. We call them embryonic layer. The outermost layer is called the ectoderm. The one inside is called the what? Endoderm. And in between the ectoderm and endoderm, you have the what? Mesoderm. So ectoderm is the outermost layer. Innermost layer is the what? Endoderm. And in between the ectoderm and endoderm, you have the what? Mesoderm. So now your epithelium is what? Generating from all the three germ layers or embryonic layer, ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm. And your digestive system is generating from the what? Your endoderm, nervous tissue from the ectoderm, and muscle and connective tissue from the mesoderm. Okay? Okay, so what did you learn so far? What are the three different types of the membrane? Cutaneous membrane, mucous membrane, serous membrane. Which tissue have the little to no regenerative capacity? Your cardiac muscle, nervous tissue. Which embryonic layer gives rise to the skin? All of them. We just talked about it. So epithelium from all three germ layers. Okay? Okay, that's pretty much it. We have completed the chapter 4. Does anybody have any question? If you don't have any question, I'm